I just wanted to see what we had left in the semester first, and then we'll take any questions. Probably, starting with last week's stuff. So this week, I just wanted you to have another resource for learning PowerShell. I don't really think anything new was well. What was new in there was something I had already kind of just showed you on my own, and that was the execution policy, the get execution policy, set execution policy. So that tutorial there describes it a little bit in more detail, as does I think the exercise that's due this week. Let's see, exercise 2. Or maybe that's next week. Yeah, it must be next week. But I think that's the majority of what that at least in the pages I asked you to read through. But there's certainly you might want to read more of it to learn more about PowerShell and its capabilities. So we've got that. We've got another exercise, exercise 2. It's due this week, where I introduced the start transcript. So the start transcript is a PowerShell commandlet that's very useful if you are going to be doing something like a digital investigation or forensics or something on a computer, because it basically starts collecting everything that happens in your PowerShell session, all the commands you type in, all the output that was generated, and it saves it to a file that you specify. So, it's sort of like an audit trail, so that you can go back and look at the information later, and you also have sort of a proof to show what it is you did and what was produced by your investigation. All right, so that's probably the majority of that's probably the main thing. That just introduce some more things with using PowerShell. Use this command here, which I think Steve actually used this in last week's assignment. Instead of the for each loop. And this is, I showed it for that reason, that this one command can essentially replace the for each loop that was required to go through all the processes, and also and compare them to the day of the year and the processor time and stuff. Now, the one thing, though, that this doesn't do, and that this will address your question, Steve, was that doing this, there's no way to, well, actually, you could doing it this way. Stephen, when you did it, you tacked on another piping to the CSV to output the files as CSV. And so the get process output never got assigned to the procs variable. And so you had no way to count how many processes met those conditions unless you did the command again and didn't pipe the output to another PowerShell command. But in any case, the main purpose of this in this week's assignment is to show that a where command can replace essentially a for each, unless you need to do more in that loop. And again, in the assignment from last week, you needed to count how many of the processes met the condition of they were started today, and the processor time was greater than or equal to 5 seconds. And you also needed to, I think, to display the total number of processes that get process generated. So this doing it all in one statement doesn't allow you to do those additional items. So it all depends on what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish, as to whether you can, kind of condense several lines of code that includes a for each loop into this one line of code. If you need to count some stuff and do some other things perhaps in the loop, then you need to, it's probably better to use a for each loop. Okay, let me go. So we've got that assignment, and then we've got the second quiz on PowerShell. So that's all that's due this week, and then next week is really a couple more PowerShell exercises. And I put the study guide here for the Python final, so that you can start studying for that. And that's the only final. I decided not to do a PowerShell final. I think a lot of people are going to have their hands full studying for the Python final. So the PowerShell part of the grade will just come from the assignments and the exercises and the 2 quizzes. And then I've got this extra credit here. Anyone that has the time and wants to get a few extra points, you can do that. Okay, so any questions on what we have going for the rest of the last 3 weeks of the semester? All right. Then I guess right now, then I'll just say what I can, answer your questions about the exercise from week 13 last week. Any questions you might have. And Josh, you said you thought you did it, but it didn't work out right.
Yeah.
And that was, I only gave you some partial credit or something on it.
Yeah.
So
participation points.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we can take a look at that in a second. Is anybody gonna take off that doesn't have any questions going forward? If so, now would be a good time.
I just have some questions.
Okay, Cody, we'll see you. Yeah. Oh, you have a question, Steve?
Yeah, I have some questions about using PowerShell. I always come up with sometimes I run it as administrator and I make sure the execution policies are set right. But it's like with you have like the get types in the end of exercise 1, where it comes back and says you can't call a method on a null valued expression. And I don't understand, like, some of the things that you have us doing during the exercises don't work. And I resolved some of them because I figured out, okay, I'm not running it as administrator, or
some of them don't. Some of the commands don't work.
Yeah.
Greg, are we able to resubmit anything that we've turned in for the last one? Because I got 7 out of 10. If I fix the things and turn it in, would I get a different score? Because you didn't put on there resubmit.
Yeah, you can.
I can? Perfect. Okay, I'm good. You guys have a good night.
Okay.
Bye.
Steve, do you have an example? Okay. So
just like right now, I was just going through let's see, partial exercise 1. I mean, last week's there, but
exercise 1, okay.
And when I get down to the end there, and after I do the out file services that text to the append.
Mhm.
And then right after that, those next two or three strings or whatever you have there, they don't do anything but say I can't call them a method on a null value expression, it says.
So the dollar,
And I'm on remote signed. I mean,
the dollar serve stuff? You talking?
yeah.
Okay.
No, further down. It's like
Oh.
24 and 25. You get down there. Yeah.
These two?
Yeah. Any of that.
All right.
And that's why you said my service was empty because it's not working.
Okay. So
Maybe I
what I just did here, okay. One thing I know about okay, so let me see. I think I might know what the problem is.
Yes, I know it says that doesn't work since it's not a string. That and you explain it there.
Oh, right.
Right. And then right underneath there, it won't get the type because it's a null value.
Yeah, let's see.
Exactly. Oh, it says.
So that dollar serve is from up here, this loop, this for each loop.
Okay.
So dollar serve contains just the very last element in the services variable.
I would get so confused looking at some of these assignments when it came to PowerShell. I mean, I was doing all right because I understand in basic programming, like nothing just has a value all on its own. And I'm going, well, where does dollar serve? Where does that string come from?
Yeah, it's because now it could be that if you didn't write it this way, line 20,
Okay.
use some different names instead of then dollar serve doesn't exist.
Yeah. So and that's what I was wondering because there's a lot of things in here where you have a string, and I don't understand because I'm thinking to myself, I never assigned that string a value. How does this computer? The computer doesn't know what that string is if you don't tell it.
Right.
But PowerShell has it's a different animal. So I was struggling a lot with like, wait a minute, where do you come up with some of these strings? And I don't ever remember assigning that.
Yeah. So if, since it's like 1, 2, 3 lines up from here, if you didn't use dollar serve up here, or if you went and did a different session, or then dollar serve wouldn't exist. Yeah.
So I guess that's what I want to say. But I thought there was other assignments that we were working on where I was like, especially in like the PowerPoints and stuff like that, where you would have. Let me try to look up so I know exactly what I'm trying to. Yeah, I was like getting frustrated looking at it. And I'd look stuff up. I'm not afraid to go trying to investigate it. But I would look at some of these assignments. I'm going, wait a minute, how does PowerShell even know what that variable is? So let me see here if I can find one. I know on the, let's see, PowerShell intro 2, I think, presentation. And then you would have, let's see here. Get process, I want to work, so I understand all that. And if else I understand. I know there's a part right here. Okay, for I have to loop. Like here you said, like, where you're talking about in section 10.3 of the PowerShell PowerPoint,
Mhm. The
for each is a command that iterates, and you say like string files equals get child item, and then it says for each file, string file and files, and I'm thinking, where does string file come from?
Dollar file is created. Basically, what's happening in a for each command, it's kind of like the for X in list in Python. Dollar file gets created in this statement.
Okay, I see that. I couldn't grasp that. I'm going, wait a minute, because like in Python you would have to.
I definitely didn't get that either.
What the in command does is it iterates through dollar files, because dollar files, after doing, let's look at dollar file.
Because like you said, like in Python, if I said X for X and this and that, I have to define X first in Python. And I was like, where did this string file come from? And I say string file because
actually, no. I mean, it's actually doing something very similar. If I do this in Python, my list equals, and then if I say for X in my list, this is the exact same thing. Okay, so it's doing the only difference here is that PowerShell uses for each, but the X in my list is exactly analogous to dollar file in dollar files.
Okay.
X
if dollar number equals get child item, would it still be for each dollar file in dollar number?
Yes.
Okay, now I understand.
So maybe the confusion is that the variable names are too close.
Yeah, I didn't. I was going.
You thought that maybe they should be related in some way. Yeah. No, it's just a variable. I could use $X for dollar file, or I could use something totally different.
Okay. That totally makes it so much more understandable to me, because I was like, where does that come from? And I don't understand.
So the in command in both languages basically takes a iterable data structure like a list, which dollar files is after being assigned get child item, and it takes in a loop. It takes each item, each instance of the array or list of dollar files and stuffs it into dollar file. So in this case, we just say, so dollar files looks like this, right? It's a whole array of items, and dollar files sub zero, files sub zero is the first item. Dollar files sub one is the second. And so when I say for each dollar file in dollar files, it basically assigns dollar file this first item, and then dollar file the second item, and then the third, and then the fourth, each time through the for each loop.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Hope that makes it clear.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute. And that's what kind of, I don't know if I would have still been able to get to the end of being able to do the loop, because of the fact that I did throw, like you said, I piped it to the .csv file, and that kind of closed the deal on that.
Yeah, in that particular assignment, you could do it the way you did it, but you're going to have to add some additional commands in order to get the total number of processes and the total number of processes that met the criteria. So you need at least 2 more commands to get that information to do those final outputs, which, you know, you needed to finish the assignment off.
Right. I was,
So,
and
so
I just,
probably it makes most sense in this particular case to do a for each loop.
Yeah.
Instead of the
yeah,
where.
but I couldn't figure that out. I was like, I don't understand the file. And I tried it. I'm going looking at it, I'm going, but there doesn't work. And if I did try to put that in there, obviously I couldn't because I was already piping it to something else.
Right, right.
So
Yeah, because your variable after the command, you had like a dollar processes variable or something, and it was empty. Nothing got assigned to it because the output got redirected to.
I probably left it there while I was just trying to figure out where I was at. Just a lot of times I'll just put it in there, so it prints out what I'm doing, so I can see.
Yeah. No, that's a good idea. If to assign output that you're not sure what it looks like to a variable, so you can examine it a little bit easier.
Yeah, and I might have left it there, and then 2, 3 o'clock in the morning comes around. I'm going, wait, I can't figure this out. Take the headphones off. Go to bed.
Yeah, when it's 2, 3 in the morning, it's time to start anew the next day.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think I'm going to check out for the rest of the night.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
So, Josh, we can go through what you got and see what you need to work on.
Okay.
So, here's what this.
You know what I couldn't figure out how to in ISE. I couldn't figure out how to get into like a debugging mode to kind of see what I was doing wrong. Is there something I have to do?
Yeah, there isn't really a debugger. The
Okay.
only really thing that you can do is kind of like what I was showing, where instead of running things as a script, I was just putting them in the console and going line by line. So we can do that. Here's your script. We can do it line by line. I'll just copy
Okay.
and paste. So that way we can see what the results are. So dollar processes now looks like this big array of information of all the processes. Okay, so right now it has all the processes in it. So now we can just kind of see that this is a array by, you know, looking at the 0th element. All right, and it contains the first item, and then the first element contains the second item. Okay, so and the other thing you can do to see what type of variable it is, you can do a get type, and it says it's a system array.
Okay.
And it kind of tells you here that, you know, that's how you can access individual elements with the brackets. Okay, so we got that. So we got everything in processes. Now, this next line here, it starts off fine, but then really all you're doing here, and we can we'll show you what this does. All this is going to do is it's going to put each process from processes. It's going to put each one into a new variable called process, dollar process. But what you have in your code is just the variable, and what that's going to do is just going to spit it out to the screen. So we'll see all those processes scroll by.
Yeah. Okay.
So in other words, it's not doing anything useful anyway, other than maybe for yourself to see that, okay, that's what this, you know, that's what is going to be in dollar process each time through the loop. But this wouldn't be something for, you know, the end product. It might be, again, sort of a debugging tool for yourself.
I see.
Okay. And
I was trying to go back to the exercise to look at each step, and I was like, well, maybe that does something.
Right,
Yeah.
It's not quite what you wanted. So, and then this is fine. You change your directory to dollar home documents, so that you can so now that any file that's produced is going to go to the your documents directory. So dollar home is, if you were to list what dollar home contains, it contains the current logged in user's home directory. And adding /documents to it just puts you in the documents folder. So there's nothing wrong with this command. That's perfectly fine. This one we can kind of comment out because it's not necessary. It might have been something, like I said, to do as a debugging tool. Okay, so now this here is, again, all this is going to do is it's going to put the last, whatever's in dollar process, it's going to send it out to a file. Well,
Okay.
Okay. we want to actually
Do the last step first.
Right.
But I know I see I made some mistakes there too.
So we can get rid of that command because that's not doing anything useful for us. Now here's where you started off right, except you can't really do this where you're going to have to really do an if statement in here, because what this does, this is what you want to do if the start time is today. So this is what you want to do if the start time is today. You don't want to just do it for each process. Otherwise, you're really just spitting out each process. Now this where is really in what we're doing here. The where start time equals and the seconds greater than equal and all that. You would normally use that sort of when you're not going to put it in a loop. So the where, like I said, in this next exercise of this week, so we use where typically when we are going to get a bunch of items like this, and we are going to do something with them only if they meet certain criteria. And that's kind of what we're doing, except that since we're using a for each loop, usually these two are what's the word?
Just different types of processing of the data.
Yeah, the where is kind of like a replacement for doing a for each. So you would use a where instead of using a for each loop with an if. But since we also have to do a couple other things like count how many total processes and count how many met our criteria, then in that particular case, a for each loop works better. So let's clean this up. If we can, we'll get rid of this. The idea is correct. You just don't have the syntax quite right. Because that is going to belong in an if statement. So what we're going to do for each process, we're going to, first off, we're going to get today's date. And actually, we could have gotten that outside of the loop. Okay, because unless you run this and the day changes, like you're doing it right around midnight, then we don't need to do it each time in the loop. So we can get the date before we do the loop, and then the criteria is we want to say if the process was started today. And there's a couple ways to do that. And the way that I chose was, if you look at the what the results of get date. So we say dollar. Okay, so that when you just show it like that, it just gives you the date in a kind of, you know, human readable form. But if we look further at today and find out all of its properties, we'll see that today has a bunch of stuff. It's got hours, minutes, seconds, but you know, how can we compare what today got for us, what's in today, with this, the start time? Because, you know, what today is like a date, but the easiest way to do it is if you look at this and you see, oh, there's a variable day of year. Well, day of year, if I show you today, day of year is really just the integer value of which day it is, starting with January 1st. Okay, so basically, since today, the day of year is the 118th day, then if the process's day of year, the start time, is 118, then that means it was started today. You see what I'm saying?
Mm.
There's other ways to do it. You can figure out, you know, the month, day, year, and find out the month, day, year from today as well, and compare all those. But that, to me, is sort of like too much work, since
Yeah.
one property of the get date or the start time, because they're both the same type. What get date returns is the exact same type of object that start time contains.
Oh,
So they both have a day of year, so you can just compare those. And that's what this if statement's doing. Comparing the day of year from the process's start time to today's day of year. And if they're equal, that means that the process was started today.
today.
Yeah.
I think I'm understanding that. Okay.
Okay.
Got it.
So then, if that's true, and I could have made this you could make this a compound if statement, but I broke it up in my example because it's a little bit easier to read when it's not a compound if. So if the process was started today, then we check the processor time. So
quick question. If you wanted to do the compound, would it be if and statement?
yeah, I would say
Okay.
and proc dot total time. Okay.
Got it. Okay. Okay. That you don't have to do that. I just wanted to know.
Right. No, that's good that you to ask that, because normally that's exactly what I would do.
Okay.
I would make it a compound if, but you know, when I'm explaining something to a class, a lot of times it's easier to break it down into, you know,
Understood.
small bites. So
Okay.
for the given the process that we're looking at now, and I need to change the process. So the process that we're looking at now, if it was started today, then if the processor total seconds greater than equal to 5. I'm going to show you if there's actually a there's actually a CPU property that equals total processor time, total seconds. So you could replace this whole thing right here.
With CPU.
CPU. And a couple people did that, and that's
Huh.
fine.
Okay.
Except, well, is that? Yeah, actually, that will work only if I actually select CPU up here.
I see. Okay.
Since the get command didn't select the CPU as one of the fields, then you wouldn't be able to use it. So if you change your processes, your get process to include that, then you're good. And then
Okay.
you wouldn't need this.
I see.
You do it either way. They will both work.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how to get the total processor time in seconds. So that's why
So the total,
I wrote total processor time dot seconds because
right.
I wasn't sure.
The problem with that is that total processor time, if we look at so seconds is based on the hour, the day, the hour, and the minute. In other words, it's the seconds in this case is just the number of seconds.
So it's continually counting.
Well, and the seconds actually flips over to 0 at the
Right.
end, you know.
And it adds a minute and then starts over again. I see.
So total seconds, in this case, they actually happen to be the same, but total seconds is probably the better variable to use. It also includes all your milliseconds and everything as well. So could it have worked? Yeah, no. See how seconds here is 52? That's just the number of seconds
I see.
in the given minute.
Right.
52 seconds. Total seconds is 292. So
okay.
you know, it would, in this particular instance, it would work because, no, actually it wouldn't, because
Yeah, it wouldn't because they're different.
1 minute and 0 seconds, the total processor time is much more than 5. It's 60, but you would only get 0 if
Right.
it's 1 minute and 0
Because
seconds.
it's only reading that section.
Yeah. So
Okay, I understand.
This is essentially like multiplying 60 times minutes and then adding seconds. That's what this is, because it's 240 plus 52. Okay, so this is only seconds within minutes. This is total seconds. So that's why you want to use total seconds as your variable. Now, like I said, CPU is exactly
Has all of that in there.
Yeah, total processor time dot total seconds. So either way works. All right, so greater than or equal to 5, that's perfect, that's good. So then we know that if it gets down here, that the process is both started today and has total processor time greater than or equal to 5. So now we want to send it out to our file. So what you did there looks good, and all we need to do is add the file part. So we just type that to,
Right.
wrong path, but since you're already in the right path because you changed $home documents, you can just say whatever I told you. If I told you to call it something, I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it was processes.
So, and then with a pen. Okay, so this is the command that actually writes the file.
Oh, I would need to change. Would I
Yeah.
need to change? Let's see, name, ID. Would I need to change that third one?
Yeah, total seconds. Or since we're using CPU, so that you would either use total seconds instead of seconds, or we can just say CPU, since CPU is like it's kind of like an alias for total processor time at total second.
Oh, okay.
So, since we got it up here, okay, and if you were following along with your own, you would need to add this since we changed it to CPU.
Understood.
And then you did the start time. Okay, so that's all good. Working.
Would I need that many brackets at the end?
Yeah, you need one to end this if statement. You need another to end this if statement.
Oh,
I mean this if statement, and then you need a third for ending for each. Yep. For every open bracket.
I definitely would have missed that.
Yeah. For every open bracket, there needs to be a closed bracket. Okay.
Understood.
So this is good. And then once we're done, then the last part of the assignment was to display the total number of processes. So this actually has to be processes. Oops. Dot count gives you the total number that was gotten up here. Okay, that's the total number.
Uh-huh.
And then, of course, you change that.
Yeah.
And then the last part was how many were started today that had more than 5 seconds. And that's going to be our counter, which we never included. So we are going to count how many, whoops. I'll just count. So we were going to count how many met the criteria. So we need to say here, so this goes inside of this if statement because we're only going to increment if it was both started today and the CPU time was greater than or equal to 5. So we're going to count those.
Did you mention count at all? I don't remember that.
Yeah, that in the first, it was either in one of the, either in the intro assignment or it was in the presentation.
Okay.
So count gives you how many, for every array or list has a count attribute.
Understood.
So then process started today that were used more than 5 seconds. So that's our counter. And we're gonna out it again. And that's the last thing we send out to our file.
And do you have to, well, I guess you wouldn't have to put that in like any kind of loop or anything, right?
No, because we're done with the loop. This is just at the end. We finished processing all of the processes and we've already written all those out to the file. Okay, we've written out all those to the file. Now we're just going to add 2 more lines to the file